Hey, everybody. Welcome to this session today. I'm joined today by Jake Reid, who is the president of Sporting Kansas City, a Major League Soccer team in the MLS. Jake, it's so great to see you. And we have a connection, everyone.
Yep.
Jake and I go way back. The year 2000,
Yeah.
2001, Jake's senior year of high school at Lakeview High School in Cortland, Ohio, which is in the Youngstown area. And I had the opportunity to help recruit him to Grove City College to play basketball for us. And so it's really great to have you on the call, Jake.
Yeah.
It's been a
I
long time.
appreciate it. Good seeing it, Tim. And I think that was the peak of my athletic career anyway. So you saw me at my best. And then I shifted into the business side, which has worked out okay too.
I would say it has, definitely has. And, I was very fortunate to watch a lot of ball games of Jake's his senior year, and certainly one of the guys we wanted heavily, not just because he could play basketball, but he was just a good guy and came from a great family and obviously had a ton of character. And so tell me a little bit about kind of what your run has been. I mean, kind of tell me a little bit about yourself. Give me an introduction.
Yeah, well, so I've been here for almost 9 years now, but let's go back to kind of Grove City. And as we were wrapping up there in 2005, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, right? Like I wanted to come out. I had a good educational base from Grove City, and I love sports. I was always really passionate about sports, and obviously basketball was my primary passion. And so you can probably see over my shoulder, I've got a photo of Oklahoma City. That was my first ever sports game I worked in. So I got a role with the Hornets at the time in New Orleans and went down there at 2005, was an entry-level salesperson, bottom of the barrel, making 100 phone calls a day, trying to sell people tickets to a team that I think had won 22 games the year before. So we weren't exactly a hot commodity in the market, but fell in love with it. Loved the sales side, and it wasn't what I thought. I thought it would be kind of you're convincing people to buy and tricking them into doing this, and it was really relationships, which is something I'd enjoyed my entire life. Really, was building relationships and connections and kind of meeting people and helping them out. And so, unfortunately, that was a short stint down there because Katrina hit in August of that year, as everyone's probably familiar with. And so we relocated to Oklahoma City, which obviously, in light of the disaster, was horrible. For me personally in my life, it was probably a blessing in disguise, as are most things that you can't see the big picture on, which none of us can. I met my wife there. I've been married for going on 13 years this summer. We've got two boys, 6 and 4, almost 5 at this point. So aside from my day job, they keep me pretty busy. But was there for about 2 years trying to help get that team launched in OKC. And then moved up the sales ladder a little bit, and then had a good opportunity to go be an inside sales manager and kind of manage that entry-level team in Charlotte with the then Bobcats, now Hornets. So a bunch of name changes along the way, which probably dates me when I was there. But went to Charlotte, was there for 2 seasons, really loved it, and was running the entry-level team, had a lot of success. And then a couple guys I'd worked with went over to England to run a soccer club called Derby County, and knew nothing about soccer. And I laugh, another name Tim will know, Josh Bush, who was one of the guys on our team, who's still a really dear friend of mine. Josh was the soccer fan of our group, and I used to make fun of him all the time because I just didn't get it. I didn't like it. And so we laugh now of the irony of what I do versus what I thought of it in 2005. So it's come full circle. But went to England. It was a great career opportunity. We did not have kids yet, so it made sense personally. And we thought, hey, if we're going to do something like this, now's the time. And it was a step up for me to go run what was then a really non-existent ticket division. So I got to go over there and set it up from scratch and kind of build it from the ground up for 2 years with a couple of guys, which was awesome. And that ultimately led to this role. These guys reached out and said, hey, we're opening a stadium. That was 2010, and I've been here ever since. So I came here in 2010 as kind of the head of ticket sales, worked up into a chief revenue role in 2013, and then became team president in, I guess, the very end of 2015. So really since all of 2016 on, I've been in the current role. So there's the very, very quick flyover version for you.
Great. Well, and, it's interesting that it's really interesting. When I think back to my Grove City time, of course, you knew I coached golf.
Yep.
And I got that coaching job for golf from the then athletic director, Chris Smith, in 2000 when I got there. And he's like, we're going to have you coach golf. And I said, Coach, I don't really know golf
at
all. And if you remember, my girls team women's team ended up winning a conference championship 2 or 3 years later. And, I was conference coach of the year and on the national ranking committee, and actually had more success as a golf coach than I ever had as a head basketball coach, at least at the college level.
Funny how things happen.
Yeah, it really is. And, I think that, you always hear about the fake it till you make it concept. I don't know if I completely agree with that, but I would say that, you have to always grind and work and do all you can to listen to people, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me kind of what made you want to go into the sport management realm, into the career field? I mean, what led you educationally to want to do what you're doing?
Yeah, it sounds very unscientific, but just followed my gut, right? And as you're aware, we didn't have a sports management program at Grove City, at least at the time I was there. So I kind of just took I graduated with a marketing degree, heavy kind of business focus, and just figured that would give a good baseline. And obviously now sports marketing is turned into a massive, undergrad degree. And I think we've got a lot of folks that we hire that come out of great programs. But I didn't have that. And I just figured I want to get into sports. It's something I'm passionate about. I could see myself doing this long term. The part I skipped over is my freshman year, I was an engineer. And I realized quickly that was not going to be the path for me.
I remember that very well.
I didn't have much of a social life freshman year. Between basketball and studying for engineering, I don't think people even knew who I was. But I think that's good, because in hindsight, like anything in life, you can look back and realize, I think it helped. It caused me to step back and think about, what do you actually want to do, and what do you enjoy, and what are you passionate about? And so as tough as that freshman year was, probably great in the sense that I think the light bulb went off of like, something in sport is what I want to do. But I was pretty naive. I probably didn't do a ton of research on what that meant and what the career opportunities were. And I, just kind of looked around and found, that one and got into the sales program without knowing what I'd get into. I just figured, hey, I'll start here, use it as a launching pad if I don't like it, but at least my foot's in the door. And thankfully, I like anything in life, if you surround yourself with good people, which I had there, it worked out, and they helped get me on a path that obviously, led to a lot of success.
And you and a former Hiram baseball player by the name of Jeff Nielsen went through a program out west. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Jeff and I still stay in touch. Jeff was with us in Charlotte for a couple of years as well, and so it was called Game Face, a great program, and that was where I went right after school, right? And what that was the best way I could describe it as kind of a 2-week just intensive boot camp on sales and service training. Kind of the first week was 8 to 10 hours a day in a classroom, kind of going through scenarios, role plays, things that happen, how to handle phone calls, face-to-face meetings, all those things. So kind of the real life, hey, here's what you're going to get hit with. And then week 2, we were actually selling. At the time, it was for Arizona State football. So we were actually calling clients on their behalf and working through it. So, you'd spend half the day doing that, the other half of the day kind of talking through, okay, what happened? How did you handle it? Here's what we can do differently. So it was a really great baseline for me as someone who had never done that before. It was humbling, because I think you realize quickly that, still in sales, if you get, 2 out of 100 that are good conversations, you're probably having a pretty good day. But also just kind of it was kind of a shortcut to, sales 101 for me. So when I hit the ground running in New Orleans, I think I had a little bit of a head start on everyone else.
Now, one of the things with regard to preparation, I mean, I think that ultimately, in order to be able to get into this field, you obviously need to have some experience. You don't even need experience. You need to have passion like you had. Yeah. You have to have some preparation too, which you got at Game Face. And of course, just being a college athlete and also going to a school like Grove City, it was very challenging and rigorous academically. It didn't matter if you were in a business program or, you were going to get challenged. Sure. One of the things that is I'm curious about, obviously, with you being the president of Sporting Kansas City, what are in that? I mean, it's a major league team, which is just amazing to me, and it's really cool to be able to know that a former player of mine is actually a president of a major league franchise. Yep. But what are the biggest challenges that you face every single day in your job? I mean, what are the things that make the really difficult things?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, a couple of things, and let me hit on something first that you said, which I think is important, right? Yeah, for me, even when we're hiring those entry level roles today, the experience is less important than kind of the mindset and the person and how they, what we see in them, right? So it's actually very akin to your recruiting story early, right? You've got to you got to be able to play basketball in that instance, but there's a bunch of intangibles that are really important as well. And so for us, I think we're looking at work ethic. Do you have a good drive? And there's no surprise, we actually hire a lot of collegiate athletes. And ironically enough, I think D2 and 3 tend to pan out better just from kind of the work ethic side than D1 sometimes. So work ethic is key. Open to learning, I think, is really important. Being able to come in and adapt and learn on the go and try new things is key. We're always looking for kind of natural leaders within whatever role that is going to be. And then passion and positive attitude are really the other two. And we listen, there's a bunch of others, right? Integrity is important and trustworthiness and all those things. But if you can kind of distill down in folks, those characteristics and they're there, I think that's a great building block and foundation. So I think that's an important piece. In terms of day to day, for me, part of what I love about my role is it's all over the board. So, I view myself as kind of, I want to plug in where I can help the most that day. Sometimes that's on our sponsorship team if we've got a big client meeting or a big renewal up or a big sales pitch we're going on. Sometimes that could be on the ticketing side if we're trying to get something done there. But I'm kind of the interface with our head coach, our ownership, and our leadership team. So I think trying to make sure that communication is really important. That sounds simple in organizations. You'd think that everyone talks and everyone knows what's going on. It's not always the case. You got to be really prescriptive about making sure that communication is good and flowing properly. Managing up to ownership is really important in my role. They're a big no surprise rule group, which I appreciate. And so making sure that they're aware of everything. And more importantly, if there is bad news coming or a result that didn't, go how we thought it would, how are you presenting that to make sure that they're still confident in what we're doing? And we've got a great group, so that makes my life a lot easier. But, people are the biggest asset and the biggest challenge, as is probably every organization, right? And motivation, keeping people on track. We have a very long season in soccer. Our first game is February 21st, and the final this year will be November 10th. So if you're fortunate enough to play the whole year, it's a grind, and it can be a lot of work, and it can be very tiring on folks. So I think you've got to be, again, really thoughtful around, how do you motivate? How do you keep people energized? How do you keep them focused? How do you build in breaks naturally through the year to give people some time off? But working with people is probably the biggest challenge, but also the thing I love the most. So.
Sure. Well, you brought up something I wanted to kind of jump in on, and it was communication. I mean, do you find that today's aspiring sport professional struggles with communication, or even people coming out of college in general? I mean, is that a challenge for them?
I would say, listen, I don't want to sound like the old get off my lawn guy because I'm 36. So I don't think I'm that old yet.
Sure.
But it's different, right? Even when I was in school, I remember, this will really date me in your class. Laugh at this. I mean, I remember Facebook launching in college for us, and it was like this weird thing. No one really knew what it was. And I say that now because I think people are so in tune to what's going on here, and I can talk to anyone I need to very quickly via text or Snap or whatever it might be. And we don't resist that, but I think there's times where, listen, in our business on game days, if there's an issue, Tim's coming up to me in the game in the heat of the moment, and he's going to want an answer on why, whatever, the hot dog was cold or the beer got spilled, and what are you going to do about it? And there's a million examples of what that can be, but you've got to be able to interact with people. And so I think it's, us trying to find those folks who have got good real life experience, who have been engaged in team sports is really important, right? That communication lends itself really well to transition into the working world. And so one thing I always encourage people to do, which I didn't do a great job of, was, go get a bunch of summer internships and go do stuff and actually get some real life experience, get out there. And even if you hate what you're doing, that's positive too, because you realize I don't want to go do that, right? And so I think you start to narrow down what you enjoy, what you don't. But more importantly, you learn how to build relationships, which is really what the key to everything is about.
Absolutely, especially in this business. And, it's kind of interesting. You just I had like a bunch of these other questions you more or less just talked about, but I'm going to jump into them a little bit. I mean, one of the things, what are the skills that you think, that you consider that are essential for the aspiring sport professional, the one that's going to actually climb the ladder and stick
Yeah.
at it?
I there's a quote that I referenced to our group the other day that I remember vividly that my dad had posted in our crummy basement during the jump stretch bands that I was supposed to be doing squats on, getting ready for hoops. Was to get what others don't, you have to be willing to do what others won't. And I hated that quote for a long time because I associated it with like those awful workouts I was doing, and it took me a while to appreciate what it means. And I think I've always tried to do that once I got into the sports world. I was never the best salesperson. I was never the most talented, of anything we were doing. And I always try to just control the controllables, right? It's a cliche as old as time, but I think it's true because to me, I could outwork anyone next to me, right? I could put in more time. I was willing to do the extra weekend activities that maybe other folks didn't want to do. And in my mind, I figured if I do all these and just outwork everyone, I'll make up for whatever lack of talent I might have. And I think that's certainly true. And I see that on our staff, a ton of folks who move up are usually the ones that are willing to put in the extra time and the extra work. I'm sure there's people out there who can do an 8 to 5 punch the clock and be better than everyone else. I was not one of those folks. And so for me, I think we want that passion. We want someone with a great attitude about what they're going to do and then work ethic. I mean, it's just, again, none of these are rocket science or breaking news on things that are important, but having seen them played out over and over, I think I can't understate them enough. And the biggest piece of them is consistency, right? Anyone can do it for short sprints. You can do it for a week. It's no different than, you're trying to lose weight. You're going to go on a diet, right? It's usually it's not a life-changing thing. You're not changing your lifestyle. You're changing a quick week and then you fall off the wagon and you're back on it. And I think consistent work is the same. If you're willing to commit to it and make it, your career versus a job, I think that's where you see people that really can grow and climb within the ranks relatively quickly.
Right. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are. Tell me, I mean, you talked a lot about what you did when you first got into the business. One very vital piece of information, that I like to get to my students is the importance of networking.
Yeah.
Talk to me about networking. Why is that important? Was it important for you in your career climb?
Yeah, and the most important thing, probably my career climb, and a couple of things. One, network is important for whatever role you're in because it's going to help open doors or get you into areas that you couldn't otherwise get. And listen, my example is on the sales side, so it's very easy to connect dots on why that's important, right? I may know Tim, and I don't know this guy, but if Tim knows him, I now got an in for Tim to introduce me. And so I think being able to network, meet people, build relationships is critical. As it relates to career growth specifically, listen, when I went from Oklahoma City to Charlotte, it was because a guy that I'd worked with there who had left before was in Charlotte, and so I knew him, and he recruited me. When I went from Charlotte to England, very similar. A guy who worked at the NBA who went over, and he was our team rep in Oklahoma City. He was now the president of this team in England. He reached out because he knew me from OKC because I'd spent time. Again, I met him. This is an important fact. I would buy him coffee once a month because I just wanted to pick his brain. He was this bigwig from the league office. I was a nobody sales guy, but I figured, you know what? If I can spend $4 on a latte for this guy once a month and just ask him a million annoying questions, it's good for me, and it's the best use of a coffee spend I'll ever get. And so that led to the job in Derby because he said, hey, we'd like you to come over and run the sales if you're interested. And then even my move here, the guy who ultimately recruited me from MLS was a guy that I'd reached out to when I went overseas because he had been in the NBA and he was now working in Major League Soccer. And I just said, hey, I'd love to connect once every 6-8 weeks on what are you guys doing? We can talk through what we're doing. Let's compare notes. Maybe one of us is missing something and we'll go from there. So just kind of built a relationship over the phone for a couple of years. And he's the one who said, hey, this job's open. I'd like to put your name in. So every move I've made has been a result of networking in one form or another.
Sure. I'm glad you brought up kind of the coffee meeting because, I speak with my students a lot at any of the universities I work at currently about the importance of just reaching out to someone and saying, hey, I'm interested. I'm someone that wants to climb the ladder in this profession. I'm just getting started, but, can I have coffee with you? Can I take to a smoothie? Can I go for lunch or whatever? And it's such a critical thing. I know for me, I did that a lot in my early years. And of course, jumping from place to place and meeting the people I did got me the Grove City opportunity. And, I think that one of the things that I try to impress upon my students and anyone I talk to on the phone, even about my own journey, is that, every one of us started somewhere, right?
Yep.
You started your passion well before you were in your basement doing jump stretch.
Yep.
Well before. I started mine when I was an 8-year-old kid, got my first baseball mitt. It goes all the way back, but in order to be able to climb, you do have to know the right people, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great. I think it's Nike who did the commercial, and I love it. It's kind of everyone's just a kid from somewhere, right? And it couldn't be more true. And so, yeah, I think the relationship side and the networking side really is you'll get out of it what you put into it. And again, I'm full of cliches. I can go all day, as my staff will tell you, but they're cliches for a reason, because to me, they've panned out to be true. And I think, taking a minimal amount of effort and, listen, this is a guy, when I came out, I was making my first role. I think I made $14,000 a year. So as you can imagine, my parents were incredibly thrilled after a 4-year collegiate education. But even then, right, if you're going to go buy a coffee, it's a cheap way to get to know people in an informal setting. And I usually tell people, listen, most people are going to have some sort of beverage in the morning, whether it's, tea, coffee, smoothie, whatever, and everyone's going to eat lunch. So those are good times to catch people, because you're not going to inconvenience them. They usually have some schedule that they're in. So if you can just slide into that schedule that day and buy it for them, you're probably more likely to get a yes.
Sure. Well, and here's a small world story for you that's near to where you are right now. 2 years before I came to Grove City, I was the athletic director and head men's basketball coach at Calvary University there in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And I lived right at what used to be the Grandview Triangle. It's no longer there. The road basically where the interstate goes to downtown and, 70 in the downtown. And so, I remember I was the athletic director, the men's basketball coach, the soccer coach, and everything else. And I made 17.5 and I killed myself to do it. But, without that experience, I never would have gotten. In fact, Steve Lammy, who's a head coach at Grove City College and Jake knows very well, the reason why he brought me to Grove City was because of my head coaching experience at Calvary and, of course, being an assistant at Williams College. But, I think that it's all looking back at kind of what your journey has been. And I think too many young people don't necessarily think about that enough. They kind of want to get from point A to point Z without, the journey.
Yeah. And it's hard because a lot of times you don't know what those connections will lead to, if anything, right? So there's no do this and this happens. It's just one of those things that if you do it consistently enough and long enough, good things will happen.
Absolutely. Another question I had, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, was social media. And really a question I have is technology and social media has really changed sport media.
Yep.
Many of the students that will be watching this video are in a sport marketing and promotions class, and others are in other classes. But how does technology and social media, how has it changed sport media? And how has it impacted the field of sport management?
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. I did an interview with the local news station yesterday. If anyone's followed the NFL during the Chiefs AFC Championship game, there was report of a laser pin that was on Tom Brady, and so and there was some snowballs thrown the game before, and then for our playoff game this year, there was a bad call by the official, and then some fan threw a beer onto the field. So anyway, this person was doing a story on the new fan, and is it more aggressive, and all these things are happening. And I said in the interview, I said, this stuff's been happening since sports were a thing going back 100 years. The difference is social media. You didn't really know about a lot of this stuff 20 years ago, because if there's a laser pin on Tom Brady, unless ESPN picked up on it, it didn't go viral, right? And so now, it's commonplace. So to answer your question, it's changed, how we do business. I think we have embraced it. We are huge advocates of social media, of technology in general. And when we built our stadium in 2010, at the time, we were the first team to do Wi-Fi throughout the venue, which now is commonplace, right? But then was just crazy to think you'd have, high density Wi-Fi in a 20,000 seat venue. We're very active on social media. We engage with fans. We don't run away from that. We think it's a way that we can communicate directly with them. Now you've got to be careful, right? There's a bunch of, people that are irrational like there are anywhere in life, and you've got to be able to filter through, legitimate complaints and concerns and comments versus just you lose and the person's upset and the world is ending. But I think if you have a good team that can do that, it can be really beneficial because you can engage very directly with them. And I use that for fans a lot. I love interacting with our fans. I think it's important that they feel like they've got a connection with, me at the club, so that if there are things that need to change, we can work on it. So I think you see teams that either fight it and resist it, or teams that embrace it. And our philosophy is that it's not going away. It's going to continue to evolve. And, everywhere else in, the business world, people are using it to their advantage. So why shouldn't we? So I'd say we've been very active and very much an advocate for it.
Great. Well, and I think it kind of goes to the next step, another question. You probably have somebody who's in charge at Sporting Kansas City, in charge of all the marketing, or you have your marketing director and they have their own team. How, from your role as president, what kind of strategy do you have to promote Sporting Kansas City in the market?
Yep. Yeah, so we do have, our marketing group runs all of our social media as well. So we've actually got an individual who runs all of our social accounts. And, for us, listen, I tell people our sport has grown double digits since I've been here. But it's all relative. We started with such a small base that, we're still playing catch up, right? So for Kansas City, as an example, latest survey would tell you we've got about 45% of the folks here would identify themselves as fans of Sporting Kansas City. You flip over to the Chiefs or the Royals, it's closer to 85%, right? So although we've grown significantly, we still have a long way to go. But those leagues are, decades older than we are. We're going into our 24th season. So we're still, infants in some regard. So for us, promotion is different. We have a younger fan base. We've got a fan base that's much more used to social media. They go about their lives much more online and social media. Our average fan, I think, is 42. You look at baseball, it's 57, and I think NFL is 55. So we skew really, really young. So for us, I think social has been a huge aspect of us getting the word out. We probably do a little bit more guerrilla, non-traditional marketing than the other folks who are probably more traditional media, and that would be TV, billboards, kind of your radio. Don't get me wrong, we do a lot of that, but ours is probably a lot more targeted online and social media, and then events. We've used events in the community to help grow the brand, which I think has been successful. So we're very active. We're very engaged. We probably just take a different tact than some of the other major leagues in town.
Sure. Now, with regard to, you brought up internships earlier, and how important is an internship for someone who's just really just getting into the profession or interested in it? I mean, how important is it? And do you have a lot with Sporting Kansas City?
We do have a lot. So we've got multiple classes through the year, kind of spring, summer, fall classes that we bring in. And I think they're key. I would tell you one of the things people always ask me, what do you wish you would have done? It was do an internship. I worked for the SID group at Grove City for a while. And so I'm not going to say I had zero experience, but I certainly didn't go out there in the summer and go, work with a team or, just kind of dive in. And I think it's incredibly vital, especially, listen, our team is 75 people on the front office side. So we're a small business in the scheme of things. But if you've got a group of 75 people and you're an intern in the marketing group, for example, you're going to interact with everyone, right? Marketing is going to interact with a ticketing group, with sponsorships, with our communications team, with our operations team, with the team side and the players. And so I think you get such a wide view of what the organization is. And more importantly, an example of, hey, if marketing maybe isn't what I love, but I've seen what these, activation guys are doing over here, maybe that's where my passion is. And then the key to at that point is that the onus is on you, right? The organization has given you the opportunity. You're going to learn a lot about marketing. If you want to find out about, that area over there, goes back to our other example, right? Go to the department head and say, hey, I'm an intern here. I'd love to pick your brain one morning over what you guys do and how I can, get more involved with that. And so again, it kind of goes back to relationships to bring it full circle. If you get in and you get an internship, you'll learn the business, but more importantly, you'll have an opportunity to kind of build relationships with the right people.
Yeah. And here's a question for you. And I'm sure you get myriad resumes and emails from folks that are interested in working with you, working in your organization. How many do you get that are hard copy?
Not a ton anymore, and they stand out. I would tell you, when the occasional, mail or FedEx, official envelope that shows up with a resume and a cover letter in there, you read it. So yeah, I mean, most of them are just submitted online. And listen, I would say our average job post, we get 600 or 700 submissions for a resume for one role. So you'll get lost in the shuffle. Not to say that we don't go through those, and if you've got the right qualifications, you stand out. But particularly entry level, when you're coming out of school and you're trying to get in, those things, I always tell people, differentiate yourself however you can. And in an age where everything is digital, if you go back to hard copy and actually plop an envelope on someone's desk in the mail, you spend a couple bucks to do it, but you feel pretty comfortable that you're at least going to get it in front of them and be seen.
Absolutely. I'm really big on the thank you note.
Thank you notes are huge. I was going to say the same thing. When I get a thank you note, and I still write thank you notes. I write thank you notes to everything, and my assistant probably hates me because she's got to mail them all for me. But I just think it cuts through the clutter, and I think there's a personal touch to it that you just don't get by sending an email saying, appreciate what you did.
Absolutely. When I look back to the years of being a college coach, and at Grove City is a great example, we were really big on handwritten notes to recruits and of course making the phone calls and everything. And how is that impactful for you to come to Grove City?
It's huge, right? I think, again, to me, it's more personal, right? And it feels like there was time taken out. It was directed at you versus, I don't know, for whatever reason, the email seems less personal because you can just blast a bunch of those off quickly and copy and paste and send and just change the name on everything. And so, yeah, it was impactful for me, and it's something that has stuck with me, and I still try to use for our folks, whether it's a thank you to an external client or a thank you to someone internally for a job well done. I still try to do handwritten as much as possible.
Great. What's it like being one of the Street and Smith Sport Business Journal's 40 under 40 award winners?
Feels good to be under 40, I guess, is a sign.
Can you explain to the class what that is?
Yeah, so the Sports Business Journal is the publication for the sports world, and they're they cover everything on the business side of sports. So less on actually none on really the team side. So they're the ESPN of the sports business world, I guess, is an easy way to describe it. And so every year they honor the top 40 under 40 executives in sports, and I was blessed and fortunate enough to be one of those last year. So our PR guy clearly did a great job of selling it through. It was a humbling experience. I don't love those things, to be fully transparent, because I don't like anything that's just about me, because it is a team effort. And so I don't do well with individual awards. I do well with when our team gets recognized. So I enjoyed the night. It was a blast. My wife got to go out to LA with me, and we had a great time. It was a little awkward when everything is about you. But ultimately, I view that as huge honor for our team and what we've accomplished. And I think to put our brand and the team on kind of the national spotlight was awesome to see.
Great. What's in closing? Thanks so much for being involved in this interview. I've learned so much just in listening, and just really just clarifies a lot of the things that I teach to my students. But you've given a lot of advice, but is there one clear piece of advice that you would give to folks that are watching right now to climb the ladder? Maybe they don't get to become the president of Sporting Kansas City. Maybe they become the MLS president. Who knows? Yep. But what's the one piece of advice that you would give that is a absolute?
Ask the question, whatever that question is. Don't be afraid to ask. I think the biggest thing I see when people are either they get to a point where they've left, or they just haven't achieved what they felt, and they always say, well, I didn't know, right? And I always say, well, did you ask? And they say, well, no. I say, well, then how would we know, right? And so that can be as easy as, hey, I would love to be in management someday. What would you recommend I do, right? Or how did you get there? And so I think people are afraid to ask questions today. They feel like they're going to offend people or rub them the wrong way. And so, listen, it's part of it. It goes back to my kind of sales DNA that I've built up over the years. But you don't know if you don't ask, right? And so I think there's again, to use a sports quote, most have probably seen the Jordan quote about he took a gazillion shots that he missed throughout his career, and he made a lot of them as well, but you miss every shot you don't take. So I think that's good advice to do, and that can be as simple as from the internship to your job to expectations. And so yeah, and then I would say this on where I am, never in my wildest dreams did I expect to be in this position. It's not because I didn't have ambition or drive or any of that. I just always tried to do the absolute best of whatever I was doing in that moment, in that role, and trusted that good things would happen, and met enough people that they did. But you don't come in and start day one as the president of the team. It took a lot to get here, and so my advice to those who are starting their careers will be, it goes back to our earlier conversation. You got to start somewhere, and wherever that place is, make the most of it. Meet as many people as you can, work your tail off, and good things will happen.
Yeah, I would add on to this as well. I would say that I always said when I was even recruiting you and all those guys, and throughout the years I was a coach, and even to this day, that no is the second best answer I can receive in any question that I ask, because then I know that either I can overcome the objection,
yep,
or, which I'm sure that you've learned over the years in sales, and you have your folks taught well in sales training. But if I know that somebody is saying no, that I can move to the next situation or next person that might be interested. And
correct.
And I think in this career path, you have to send out a lot of stuff, and sometimes it might not be right away. It takes patience in climbing, and maybe times where you're making $14,000 a year, or making getting an apartment and a meal card like I got at my first job in Owatonna, Minnesota 25 years ago.
Yep.
It just takes, being willing to climb that ladder and understanding that if it's truly your passion, you'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. For those worried, the rates have gone up since I took that job, so you won't make $14,000.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
As far as if anyone's interested in internships with Sporting Kansas City, what's the best way they can pursue those?
We've got an online portal you can submit through, or shoot me a note. I'm on Twitter, Jake Reid, REID 33, after the great Larry Bird is my idol growing up. So it all goes back to basketball, as you can see with me. Tweet at me, shoot me a note. My email is jreid@sportingkc.com, so feel free to ping me directly, and this is your start to networking. So you've got my info. Don't be afraid to use it.
Great. And by the way, everyone watching, Jake is not 6 foot tall. 6'7", probably 6'7.5".
Yeah, I still go. The half matters still. It still matters. So 6'7".
Yeah, it does. It mattered to me too.
Yeah.
Well, Jake, thanks so much. Seriously, it's been great to catch up with you again. Thanks for taking time out of your very busy day in your role there with Sporting Kansas City. And anyone that's watching, please, if you are interested in learning more about Jake, he's giving you his email. Most folks aren't going to do that in a position all the time as a president of a major league team. So think about that. And Jake, again, so proud of what you've done. And thanks so much for taking time to speak with me today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jim. Really appreciate it.
All right, take care now. We'll see ya.